everybody. Welcome to this edition of Transcendent. Transcendent is the weekly Facebook Live broadcast of San Antonio in black, white, and brown, also known as SABWB. What is SABWB? It is a leadership space where biblical worldview leaders from every position, race, and perspective converge for two main purposes. One is to build trust among ourselves, to discover, our unique giftings and build trust. Secondly, it is to collaborate or to work together, both on the value and implementation of principles. So we work together to implement principles. We work together to implement principles that shape the culture of San Antonio. So it is a citywide effort. It is a citywide ministry targeting biblical worldview leaders, from housewives to in every sector, the business sector, education, sports and entertainment, law, government, politics, finance, world, all of it. When we converge, we discover one another. And in that discovery, we also learn to collaborate, to work together, to implement an agreed upon principle that shapes the course of our city. Someone is shaping the culture of San Antonio. Someone is directing the course of the city. And too often we relegate that to some other persons. Sometimes we relegate that to city government officials or federal or state government officials, and they should be, shaping the culture and leading the city in a particular direction. But too often that direction has nothing to do with the kingdom of God, because in many cases they don't know about the kingdom of God, but the people of God do. And because we do, we're the ones most equipped and the ones most authorized, the only ones authorized actually, to move the city in a kingdom direction, in a kingdom of God direction. SABWB exists for that purpose. It is a task that cannot be fulfilled just by the use of personal charisma or even connections or just the normal course of influence. This task, this assignment that we have at SABWB requires a God element. It requires that God, by the power of the Holy Spirit, be at the center of what we do, and that he blesses supernaturally the efforts that are laid before us. And you're here tonight participating with me in this call, and I want to thank you for doing it. I see some names are already appearing. And so I want to thank you, Isaac, for looking in tonight. Cindy, thank you for looking on as well. And the others of you that are on and coming on, thank you in advance for your visiting with us tonight. Okay, so this is, before I get into the meat of our talk, which is this is part one of Black History Month. I told you in my newsletter, which I hope you have received already. If you have not received my newsletter for this first month of 2025, then please send me your email address. Text it to me. You can send it by way of email to, cflowers@sabwb.org, cflowers@sabwb.org, or you can text it to the office phone. The office phone is 210-799-3857, 210-799-3857. If you're not receiving our newsletter and our emails, please email me at cflowers@sabwb.org and let me know that you've not been receiving our newsletter, and we will put you on distribution for that. Hello, Mary Bell. Thanks for jumping on with me tonight. We'll put you on that list, and you'll be able to keep pace with us as we move together through 2025. Brenda, thanks for looking on tonight as well. So email me if you're not getting my emails, and we'll make sure that you do. Or you can also text it to 210-799-3857. Just text me your email address, and I'll make sure that that you stay in the loop of what we have done and what we are doing. One of the ways you can stay in the loop is just become our monthly partner. For as little as $10 a month, you can become a monthly partner with SABWB. Go to our website at sabwb.org and click on, excuse me, click on the tab that says Become a Partner. There's just a few little simple steps you go through to become a partner, and then you will start supporting us on a monthly basis for as little as $10 per month. I highly encourage you to do that, and I recruit some of your friends who want to be kept abreast of these things for a very little amount to become our monthly partner also. Another way you can support SABWB, since we're not a church and we don't have a list of people that are tithers and givers, we only have this means and a couple of other means that I'm going to tell you about in a moment to continue to support what we do here at SABWB. Converging leaders together, biblical worldview leaders. I sat with a group of them on Monday, yesterday, and there's some things unfolding. In fact, one of the guys that I was on with, sitting in a meeting with, JJ, you'll meet JJ soon. Jonathan, thanks for jumping on tonight as well. And we're going to be talking to you extensively about something that will shape the culture of our city called the 100-year San Pedro Springs Park 100-year anniversary. You're going to see some footage that happened in this city 100 years ago on Labor Day weekend. And so we're celebrating the 100 year. I said 100 days, 100 years ago. In 1925. We're now in 2025. You'll meet JJ and hear all about that. These are the kinds of things that SABWB wants to be involved in. We're collaborating with this effort. We are not the initiators of this. JJ and his ministry, Unite San Antonio, is the spearhead of this. But there are a number of pastors and leaders that are meeting and praying about it, and you will be hearing things about it as we move on toward Memorial Day this year in May. So keep your ears peeled and stay tuned here with us, because JJ is going to be on and we're going to do a show on that theme. But this is the kind of stuff we want to keep you informed about in our newsletter and make sure that you're up to date and up to speed, and your support helps us just stay in the flow of doing that. The other way you can support is by our book. Maybe our producer will bring that book up on the screen for you. The first of 3 books that I'm commissioned by heaven to write. This book is entitled In the Footprints of a Prophet. It is on the life of Bishop V.T. Williams, the late, great Bishop V.T. Williams, who I met personally and preached in his national conference in Jamaica for a number of years. I met him here in San Antonio. Our mutual friend here in San Antonio is Bishop Rick Hawkins, who now, of course, is in Oklahoma, but his son Dustin still leads a great Place for Life church here in our city. And I met Bishop Williams there. He invited me down to Jamaica. I went several years, and I began to hear and see that what God had done in his life. And it is nothing short of what he did with Oral Roberts or T.L. Osborne or any other of the other great revivalists and evangelists of our time. But because of where he is, just nestled off in the village of Jamaica, his story was not told. So the Lord commissioned me to write that story. I wrote it in a chronological pattern, but I interjected within that chronology thoughts for the reader, for you to be able to glean from what happened in his life and to be able to make application of it in your own life. And you're going to be, yes, Brenda, I'm going back to the Pause to Pray family. Thank you for the note. you're going to be able to glean from it in your own life and be able to stack this revelation and impact that it can have in your life. So just go to our website. I'm sorry, Xulon.com. That's Xulon.com, and get a copy of our book there. You can also get it at Barnes and Nobles. You can get it at Kindle. You can get it at Amazon, wherever you buy books. And but going to Xulon.com is the greatest benefit to us, to the ministry here, because it allows us to get a larger share of the royalty on the sale of the book. And so that's one way you can support, is by going to Xulon.com and purchasing a copy of our book, In the Footprints of a Prophet. Bishop Charles Flowers, the author. Okay, you can also support by getting ready to continue doing what you're doing in terms of your coffee drinking, and continue to get your morning Joe, or I know a guy, he would make he'd make like a quart in the morning, especially during the winter. Put it in his hot thermos and he'd drink it all day. Uh, you have an opportunity to switch your brand of coffee to Bijizi coffee. Bijizi coffee is raised in the coffee fields of Rwanda. In fact, in just a minute, you will see in a commercial, you'll see me standing in the coffee fields of Rwanda. Our people on the ground there are making sure that the top quality of coffee that comes to us out of Rwanda, it's shipped here to the U.S. In the U.S., we found a roaster who roasts our product, and now it is in little Keurig size cups. We have to get some things going on this side now for the distribution. Has about a $10,000 price tag on it. We need to get a website up and running that is e-commerce ready. We also have to do some roasting of the coffee that we have on hand, and packaging of that coffee, and then, of course, the electronic distribution of it. So your gifts help that happen. There may be somebody watching me tonight. In fact, I believe there is somebody who's watching tonight. They just can do that whole $10,000 in one fell swoop, and that puts us in a place where we can begin to sell the coffee, and the sale of the coffee supports small business here in San Antonio. It supports SABWB, and you're lifting farmers out of poverty halfway around the world, because there's a share of that money that is made on the sale of the coffee that goes back to Rwanda, back to the people that back to the place where you'll see me standing in a moment, and lift those farmers out of poverty and let them educate their children. And, we think so many things, and that the way we live life in America, the way it's lived across the globe, and that's not true. People don't live life like we live it here in the U.S. every place. There are some places that require, and Rwanda is one of them, that requires people to pay to send their children to school. There's a very small portion of that population that is even literate. And so you can't cultivate leaders if they're not educated. My youngest daughter's heart was to take the product that is already in their hands, move that product forward, and allow God to use it as a resource to lift those farmers out of the grip of poverty in Rwanda. This is not some place halfway around the world that we are not personally connected with. We are indeed connected there. So stay tuned, because I'll be presenting that little Keurig cup, and by the way, it is organic, and it is also premium. It's been graded in Rwanda and graded here in the U.S. It's premium coffee, and it is also organic coffee, and you're going to enjoy it. And your buying it supports ministry, SABWB. It builds small business here in our country, and it helps lift farmers out of poverty halfway around the world and educate their children and teach them about the things of God. So you actually doing mission work by drinking a cup of coffee. You're doing local work. You're supporting local ministry by drinking a cup of coffee. So make sure that you stay tuned for that. Jamie, thanks for listening in tonight. Alice as well. So those are the ways you can support. You can do it by Cash App, $SABWB. I'd rather you go to our website at sabwb.org and click on Become a Partner. Then just let $10 a month come out of your income resources, and that Everybody doing $10 a month moves us forward and allows us to continue to gather these leaders and do the things that we need to do to facilitate them. We're getting ready now with the Libre initiative to bus people. The week is slated to be the week of Valentine's Day. Bus them up to the Capitol and speak with our state representatives about passing school choice. Good news concerning school choice. It looks like that right now we have enough votes to pass universal school choice even out of the House. The Senate has never been a problem, the Texas Senate, but the Texas House has always been a problem. There is some problematic things going on now with it, but even in the face of that, it looks like we have enough votes to pass universal school choice. But we take nothing for granted. Therefore, we're going to put people on buses. Cynthia Dominguez, who was on here earlier, I'm not sure if she still is leading that initiative with the Libre initiative. She'll be getting me information and I'll be getting it to you so that we can get on that bus and go up and be prepared to speak to our representative. We're not just taking a day on a bus going up there, and they'll take good care of us when we go. And I want to be able to contribute as SABWB, contribute to the cost involved in doing that. Let's not leave that on the shoulders of the Libre initiative and others. Let's together, let's pool our efforts and make our impact greater as we collaborate with leaders here in and around our city. That's why we exist, to collaborate together on the implementation of principles that shape the culture. And certainly one of those big principles right now, tonight, in the time that we're in, is school choice. I was with John Melendez on Saturday night and proved to that Americans for Prosperity audience. I have my hat actually here tonight, but I don't have it on the broadcast because to wear it, you can't see my eyes. And you can't get the shine off you can't see this beautiful glow on my head if I have my hat on, so I took it off tonight. You and I are going to be able to join together as we make that happen. Okay, so let's go now by commercial to the fields in Rwanda. And when I come back, I'm going to start talking about part 1 of our Black History Month special called Victimization. I'll be right back right after this. Okay. All right, I'm here in Rwanda, and we're up in the coffee farms right now. So I've been telling you about the upcoming Be Easy Coffee organic premium coffee. And these are beans that I have in my hand. These are brand new beans. There's already a harvest already in place. These are just the early parts of the second harvest. And these beds that you see that are now empty will be full of organic premium coffee beans. And you have an opportunity to get a bag of Be Easy coffee for yourself. And we're going to work, of course, as I said before, on San Antonio blend for SABWB. You'll be able to get your coffee mug and sip premium organic coffee. I told you it was coming, and it's on the way. Brenda, I read your note during the commercial break, and my voice is actually not in the best form tonight. I'm getting over this little whatever this is in the air. I understand that someone told me that I think it was the producer who was telling me just the other night that pollen count is like a cedar count is like extremely high, and it evidently makes me adjust. but thank you for finding me here, Brenda. I'm glad you did as well. Alice, thanks for jumping on tonight. Capone De Leon, thanks for watching also tonight. So that was a Coffee Fields, and those are the ways that you can support and sustain the ministry of SABWB. Now, so tonight we're looking at one of 4 parts during Black History Month. These Tuesdays we're going to concentrate on Black History Month, but you'll find out that although the information I'm sharing is germane to the Black population in America, that it also has direct impact on every people group, every American citizen. This is my contention. In fact, what I'm going to deliver to you over these 4 nights here in February about Black history is I'm going to prove this thesis to you, that the restoration of the Black American experience is so deeply woven into and so integrated into the American experience that what happens in Black America will send unparalleled waves of impact across our nation, because we have been given graced, gifted by God as a people to be those that carry a natural sense of charisma and impact and leadership and influence that is on our shoulders, gifted by God. That doesn't make us as a people better than anyone else by any stretch of the imagination. God is not a respecter of persons. Romans chapter 2 verse 11 says he's not a respecter of persons. And then Paul encourages Timothy to let our love be without dissimulation. Dissimulation means to make a difference. That the love for God, for Black people, is no more powerful, no more direct, and no more pure than his love for white, yellow, red, or brown people. In fact, the reason that SABWB is called BWB, Black, White, and Brown, because it is intended to be a ministry that unites us beyond the things that normally would cause us as a people group to retreat into our own corners. But SABWB's job is to pull us out of those silos and bring us together into a corporate mix that we can see the glory and the beauty of God as it manifests itself here in our country. So while that is true, this month I'm specifically addressing what has happened historically and what has happened in real time currently, and what I believe will happen as we move forward in our healing process as Black America. In fact, my second book, I'm really kind of teaching, if you will, from the outline of that book on 4 words: victimization, marginalization, traumatization, and then politicization. We've been politicized as a people. But then after we have discussed those 4, we will discover the path out, the path to healing as a people group. And I want everybody should know this. Even if you're not Black, it's important for you to know, from those of us who are involved in the evolutionary process of Black America, to understand some of the dynamics associated with it. And in order to understand it, you have to get some grip on history. So tonight's going to be a little bit of a history lesson, but I'll tell you, I'll make it very interesting for you as we look at these things. So the first one of those 4 that I said to you: victimization, marginalization, and traumatization, then politicization. We've been politicized. So we're going to look at those 4, and you'll see that one builds on the other. One is laid as a foundation, the first one we're looking at tonight, and upon that is built this other one that deals with marginalization. And then, of course, being victimized and traumatized leaves us, being victimized and marginalized leaves us as a people also traumatized. We have to deal with this thing called trauma. And then as we deal with trauma, we're less subject as a people group of being politicized. Now, this is huge, folks. This is what I'm unpacking to you is huge. I'm not the first one to address the issue. There's been many who've written on the subject before me, but it is encouraging to know The voice to keep these things in check is still being spoken in the land today. And my book entitled Black America Be Healed is actually the book that I'm writing based on the outlines that I'll be giving you over the next 4 weeks, so you can have it in print in front of you. So let's start with the first one, victimization. First of all, I want to direct your attention over to the book of Genesis, chapter 1. Now, I only have a half hour with you, so it's going to be kind of like feeding from a fire hose tonight, drinking from a fire hose, as they say, because I got a lot to cover and not very little time to get there. But in Genesis, the first chapter, particularly in verse 26. Now, those who are members of Faith Outreach Center, like Melba and others that are on here tonight, you are not surprised at all. Mary Bell and others, you're not surprised at all that I'm going to Genesis, because that was one of my favorite jumping off points while I served as senior pastor at Faith Outreach Center. I'm still the bishop, the overseer of that ministry, but Pastor Anthony Walker is now the senior pastor, and he's doing such a fantastic job. I just want to jump up and down, and I want to hug him and every time I see him, because I'm so proud of what God is doing in and through him and the leadership team there at Faith Outreach Center. But I would often go to this passage, Genesis chapter 1, verse number 26. And God said, let us make man in our image and after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea. Now look with me, verse 26. Dominion over the fish of the sea, over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the face of the earth. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. So the them in verse 27 is the same them in verse 26 when he said let them. The them in verse 27 is the male and the female. Therefore, the them in verse 26 is also the male and the female. And he says, let them have dominion. It didn't say let him have dominion. It said let them have it. So there is a co-dominion mandate that is placed on the man and the woman given by God in the first chapter of Genesis. And in that verse, he tells them what they're to exercise dominion over. And this is our point tonight. He tells them what to exercise dominion over, and it deals with the fish of the sea. It deals with the fowl of the air. It's over all the cattle, that's domesticated animal life, and beasts of the field, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth, that's insect life in the microscopic world as well, that creepeth upon the face of the earth. He gives them dominion over those things. Now, please note, there is something ominously left out of the list that they don't have dominion over. The thing that they don't have dominion over, left out of the list, left out of the job description, the thing they're not to have dominion over was each other. Was each other. That in this mindset, in the mind frame of God, when he began to display his plan on the earth, that he did that with the whole of the human race operating in dominion as given to them by God. But here's what happens. In Genesis 3, and I contend that Genesis 3 is a tragedy of tragedies. There is no greater tragedy than what happened to the human race in the 3rd chapter of the book of Genesis. This is where man broke, by the act of high treason, broke his alliance and his allegiance and his communion with God, and took the secrets of the powers of the kingdom and delivered them into the hand of Satan. And in that fall of man, a fall that has fallen from such a high pinnacle to such a low place, that the depth of that fall is still being measured in level of its depravity, in the levels of its unkindness toward one another, is still being measured. The depth to which humankind fell is still being measured out. Wars wipes out millions of his fellow man. disease and all kinds of cruelties, diseases like stuff that manufactured in the labs of Wuhan. And these are not the only labs in the world. This is not the only viruses in the world. This is not the only biomedical, medically engineered things that people devise to put on other people. I'm telling you, Genesis 3, we have wrongly estimated the level of devastation of that fall. It is still being measured out in our cruelty and in our wickedness and in our depravity, one toward another. But a part of that great tragedy of Genesis 3 is that we inserted something into the list that we would have dominion over that God never put in the list. God didn't put it in the list, but in our fallen state, we inserted it. Not only did we insert it in what God said that we have dominion over, we actually moved it to the top of the marquee. We moved it to the top of the page as to what we gave it more priority, and have given the things that God gave us dominion over so much lesser priority that those things have now fallen in disarray while we're eagerly trying to exercise dominion over each other. So it is out of that, it is out of the fall of man that despots and tyrants and rulers and all of that has come forth in the human experience. Therefore, it is not a strange thing to find on a survey of human history. It is not a strange thing to find that one people group has intentionally brutalized and dehumanized and manipulated and brought into fearful bondage another people. In fact, the Bible itself, this book, is a display of a people group, beginning with the children of Israel. It's really about God's promise concerning humanity, but the working out of that promise regarding humanity follows the line of a people group that had been ill-treated in slavery. And then God by mighty hand brought them out of the slavery and brought them into another land, of the promised land that he promised he would give them. And yet in that land, they defiled themselves and went into the hand of brutal overtakers that came in and destroyed them as a people. The 10 northern tribes dispersed even to this day to the four-flung corners of the earth, but the 2 southern tribes in Babylon for 70 years and now are have returned in our lifetime, May 14th, 1948. The promise that God made to them, he has reestablished them in our lifetime. So this book is very contemporary. Though it is ancient writing, it is very contemporary because it is unfolding for us what is happening right before our eyes today. So despots and rulers and tyrants, they are a part of the fallen condition in the world. So if I take you now, go with me to the continent of Africa, and you will see that many of the African nations, like many tribal people across the world, indigenous aboriginal people and the forest dwellers, tribal people, they're still today living in many of those tribal conditions. And as tribal people do, they sparred again for dominance. That wasn't in the original plan, but because of the fall of man, it is now the top priority. They look for dominance, and in their quest for dominion, they bring another people group into captivity. And in the cases of the continents of Africa, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Nigeria, that kind of coastal bend, and even on the side of the Horn of Africa, Angola, and many of those other African countries, slaves were sold. There's a precious sister in this city. She's a pastor. Her name is Shatigo, Pastor Shatigo Nakpodia. Some of you listening tonight will know that name because she is such a woman of God and has um, uh, stationed a work of the kingdom right in the middle of the broken down people of San Antonio, and she's feeding them and ministering to them and giving her life for them. She's Nigerian by her birth, and she asked me some years ago. It was around Black History Month. It was around. Uh, I did something in the city on August 28th. That is the day that Dr. King made his "I Have a Dream" speech. We did something in the city called "We Still Dream." We'll be doing it again this year as well. Um, and she asked me during that time frame. She said, "Bishop Flowers, why is it that Black America has never held uh, your Black brothers and on the continent of Africa to account? Have never held them to account for selling their brothers into slavery?" That's what she said to me. She said there was a saying among Nigerian people, particularly, that during the time when slavery, the African was selling the African, mostly to the Muslim and then to the European, there was a saying that was equal to, like, "Don't go around the corner with me because you might not come back," intimating that you might follow me around this corner and I'll sell you. Tribal people, not just Black African tribes. You have the same tribal behavior taking place among the English and the Irish. You have the same kind of tribal stuff taking place among Aboriginal people. You have the same kind of tribal stuff taking place on the American Indian front, what we call the American Indian. All of those tribal behaviors, they would dominate their fellow man and subjugate their fellow man. Well, in the case of Africans sold Africans into slavery. Now, some would say, we're talking about victimization tonight. Some would say, well, they sold them, yes, but they had no idea what they would go through once they were sold. I don't know that to be the case, because if I look at some of the African kings, for example, Shaka Zulu in Southern Africa, among the Zulu people, he was a fierce leader. And there are some in modern context that are fierce leaders. In most recent times, the military regime of Idi Amin in Uganda, fierce leaders having only interest in themselves, brutalized their people. So the African people that were sold by their brothers into slavery came in slave ships, being victimized in those ships. They were victimized on their own continent. These are my forebears I'm talking about. They were victimized in their own continent. They were laid in cargo ships, not like dignified human beings. They were laid kind of, if you've seen the slave ships, pictures of them, how they were laid in like sardine almost, just laid there. And if they had to go to the restroom, it was right there. Right there. Either in any way that they had to use the restroom, if it was a number one or number two, it was right there. And then they would often take them and douse them with seawater to clean them off and let their refuse, let their defecation wash out to sea. Many of them became sick and many of them died. When brought up out of the hull or the belly of ships to get sunshine, in many cases they washed them off up top as well. Many of them would choose to jump off their ship and drown in this route from Africa to the Americas on a current that crosses the Atlantic called the Middle Passage. the Middle Passage. They decided that slavery was worse than drowning. So they wanted to end their torture. In many cases, they jumped off the ships and drowned themselves in the sea. Of course, that means that they became food for sharks. Now, you need to know that to this day, this is 2025, to this day, sharks still swim the Middle Passage. The route that ships took leaving Africa's shores to come to the shores of these United States, whether it was to the San Salvador, El Salvador, whether it was to the Caribbean or whether to the United States, still, predatory sea creatures like sharks still follow the routes those ships took, looking for an easy meal these 400 years later. Now, this is information, of course, that they pass down to their own progeny, however they do it, like whales and other migratory animals. They teach their young to follow that same path. So these folks were victimized in their own country. My forebears, I'm talking about, the forebears of African Americans. They were victimized in their own country. They were placed in these ships and treated as chattel or property. They were brought here and then bought and sold as though they were property. You might have seen some depictions of this sitting on a slave block or standing at a slave block, and their mouth stretched to see whether or not their teeth are in good shape, and they're examined for their strength and their ability to bring a good profit on the farm. Whether if he came with a wife or a daughter or none of those family ties mattered. There was something larger and more important in the mind of the slaver than the constitution of the African slave's family. It was his ability to bring in a crop for money, for greed, that took precedence. Some men that were stalwart, broad shoulders, stocky, they were stud animals. And they were used to, they were called breeders. They were used to have sex with a number of women, and there was a number of women on the plantation used for the same purpose, as breeders. Because again, they were not human, so to speak. They were less than human. Savages is the word that was often used by a quasi-cultured world against the behavior of some tribal people on the continent of Africa. Savages used as people here in the United States. That mindset released this whole victimization on people, ripped the families apart. So 1619 is when they first get here. Our forebearers first get to the colony 1619. So now let's 1619 to 1863 is 244 years. So for 244 years, that's almost 2.5 centuries. This kind of behavior wore on a people. Now, it does me well to bring balance to this, because in the slave trade, 3,700 freed blacks here in the U.S. 3,700 free black people also owned 12,000 slaves. Yeah, I know it's a shocker. It's not to the late Ben Kinslow. He wrote and put it in front of his book. Also, Dr. Bob Woodson speaks about this with the statesman-like accuracy. 3,700 free black people owned 12,000. Among that 3,700, 12,000 slaves. Dr. Woodson says, so if we're talking about reparations, how are we going to find the 3,700 black people that own slaves and make their lineage pay up? He's a statesman. He's one who provokes thought. So you have all this victimization for 244 years taking place. Why? If you even till this day, one of the most viewed television series in the history of American television is the series called Roots. Roots traced, the author's Alex Haley. Roots traced the migration of an African family brought over during the time of slavery, all the way up through the slave-ridden South, and freedom that was experienced by the generations that were to follow. Still to this day, now I'm 64 years old, that television series had to be 50 years ago, because it was when I was a teenager. And the eyes of everyone, black or not, but especially among black people, were glued to that television for those weeks that Roots showed, because we were hungry to try to find ourselves in the story of this American nation. So from 1619 to 1863, so 1863 is when the Emancipation Proclamation was issued. Hang with me. I got you for 10 more minutes. Hang with me. Some things led up to the Civil War. The Civil War in this country was fought largely over slavery, particularly over the capacity that free slave labor offered southern states to produce its money crop, cotton and sugar cane and other sugar cane in the Caribbean. Free slave labor. So the money was a big issue, and of course, the slaving in the Americas was only a reflection of her birthplace. The birthplace of America, European-wise, came. The descendants came from Europe, and in Europe, the British Empire had dominated the world. In fact, a statement is made that the sun never set on the British Empire, which means that somewhere on the globe, as the Earth rotated on its axis, that somewhere in that rotation was a representation of the British Empire. And the British Empire endorsed slavery. Slavery was a practice in the British Empire. So when the colonies broke away from the British Empire, they did not break away from, at least in the southern states, they didn't break away from that policy or that mindset to keep people, Africans particularly, enslaved. So 244 years of it. But if I can back up from 1861 to talk to you about let's see, 1854, Dred Scott. Now, I'm going to say this, and I need you to hear what I'm saying. Dred Scott is moved by his slave master, Emerson, out of a slave state, the state of Missouri, into a free state, the state of Illinois, and then into free territory. And when he moved him out of the slave state, he became a free man. But later, Emerson also marries the slave owner. He marries and he takes Dred Scott and the wife that he also found, because he married while there, back into Missouri, where Emerson, the slave owner, dies, and leaving behind his slave owning wife. So Dred petitions this woman for his freedom, to purchase his freedom on several occasions. She refused him. He approached her on the grounds that I am literally a free man. I was taken into free territory. I was taken into a free state. I am no longer a slave. And as a free man, I came back to Missouri, not as a slave. So when she would not agree to allow him to purchase his freedom, he went by the way of the courts. And the courts did not side with him. The court said, you're in Missouri, so we must abide by Missouri law. And in Missouri, you're still a slave. Well, he appealed to federal and finally to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court rendered a scathing decision. Chief Justice Taney, Taney, used this case to try to squelch all attempts at slaves in the slave states and even the concept of slavery in the new Americas, to bind by law a people. So when you hear the term systematic or systemic racism, you hear that term systemic racism, don't be too quick to jump and say that because of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, which is the Reconstruction era amendments, that doesn't exist anymore. Because laws, actually, when Taney wrote his decision, it was after the civil rights movement of the 1860s. No, actually, that was before. It was 1850. 1854, 55, 56, and 57 is when this Dred Scott thing was going on. And Taney, a Supreme Court justice, said, blacks can never be citizens of the Americas, of the United States. Blacks can never be citizens. He said the documents, the founding documents, Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, when it says we the people, didn't include black people. That this was Taney's statement. Of course, this sent the states, because you had the northern states that were filled with people who wanted to abolish slavery, as Europe also had a person, William Wilberforce, who led the charge to break the bondages of slavery in the United Kingdom, not just in England proper, but all over the UK, wherever the sun never set on the British Empire, that he was going for the destruction of slavery throughout the British Empire. A white man named, we would call him a white man, he's English, named William Wilberforce, put his life on the line. In fact, he spent his whole life doing it. And a week or so after, this is amazing to me, guys, a week or so after the British conceded and moved away, the British Empire moved away from enslavement. It was just days after that William Wilberforce died. He spent his whole life, his life energy, breaking the bondage of slavery off the British Empire. Now, so you had William Wilberforce-like people in America, in the new Americas. They were called abolitionists. Abolitionists. At the root of that word of abolitionist is the word abolish. They, like William Wilberforce for the United Kingdom, they wanted to abolish slavery in the U.S. Well, Judge Taney's statement set the stage for those abolitionists and free states in the North and in the West, particularly the Kansas-Nebraska Treaty and all of that. They would establish that these lands would not be enslaved. In fact, anything north of the 3630 latitude would not be in slavery, and anything west of Missouri also wouldn't be in slavery. So the battle stage is being set for the abolishment of slavery here in America. Taney's decision in 1857 heats up the fire, and we go into civil war. Eventually, we go into civil war, being fought mostly over the slave issue. So in the middle of the Civil War, our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln, writes the Emancipation Proclamation. He actually writes it in November, but it becomes effective 1 January 1863. And listen to this. Listen. The Emancipation Proclamation was an executive order. It wasn't something that's passed. We know now about the regular and the powerful use of executive orders because our current president is making it rain. He's making it rain with those executive orders. But the act of our 16th president to free slaves happened by means of an executive order. And it's a real simple statement, a couple of lines, that all the slaves in the slave states are now and henceforth free. Okay, so you got 4 million slaves in the South. They get news of this, that as of 1 January 1863, they're free. The war is still going on. So now 4 million people have a vested interest in the outcome of the war. As a result, black battalions were recruited and enlisted in the military, in the Union Army, because they're now fighting for their freedom. In fact, one of our most notable black leaders during that time, a woman named Harriet Tubman, was actually a commander for one of those black units that formed as a result of the Emancipation Proclamation that was issued January 1st, 1863. I'm out of time with you. It's 9 o'clock. I'll pick up here next week. And we will talk from here about marginalization, because 1863 frees the slaves. By the way, if you're in Texas, the reason there is a Juneteenth celebration is because it wasn't until June of 1865 that the slaves in Texas got the news. They were free just like anyone else 1 January 1863, but they didn't get the news of their freedom until June 19th, 1865, a full 2.5 years later. So June 19th, 1865 is now celebrated as Juneteenth, when the slaves here in Texas got the news that they were indeed free. So I'm going to pick up right there. It's a good place to end with the Juneteenth announcement and the slaves coming forth out of that. So I'm going to talk to you about the end of the Civil War next time, and the Reconstruction era and the 3 amendments that happened during the Reconstruction period, 13, 14, and 15. And then talk to you about, even in the face of that, how marginalization lasted for another 100 years until the 1960s. So you're going to get an education this month. Thank you, all of you, for taking the time, because you need to understand, just as we do, you need to understand what has shaped us as a people. Kimberly, thanks for looking on tonight. Gloria, thanks for listening. Jeff, Crystal, Mike Rodriguez, thank you. Thank you, Mike, for jumping in. Erica, thank you for listening. We need to understand some stuff. So do me a favor, like, as many of you already have, comment. comment, as many of you already have. Here's the third thing I need you to do. You've liked, you've commented. Now please share. Share this out on your own social media platforms. Learn together how God is moving in a particular people, the African American population. But embedded in that movement is an outworking and is a glory for the entirety of the nation. Our healing is your healing. Our restoration is your restoration. Our victory is your victory, because we're one people. We're one people. All right. Thanks again for joining me tonight. I will see you right here for Transcendent next Tuesday night at 8 o'clock, the Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. All right. Love y'all big. Have a good night. Bye-bye now.